You don't truly love yourself if you have not done shadow work. You don't truly know self care or real self love if you have not gone into the depths, the deepest and darkest parts of who you are, your soul, and your identity, your past mistakes, your traumas. If you are too afraid to go into that layer of yourself, the layers that you have deemed unworthy, the layers where you have told yourself that you can't think about, that you can't talk about, until you open up to those aspects of yourself and start to shine light on it, you won't know true self love and you won't be able to love others the way that they need to be loved. You're basically placing conditions on yourself. You're telling yourself that you're only deserving of the happies, of the goods, of the easy. You're telling yourself, your inner child, your inner self, that they're not fully deserving, that they're not fully loved unconditionally. Shadow work is going into the darkness of yourself. It is facing your past, your traumas, your pains, the parts of you where you may have neglected yourself or you allowed pain to happen to you, regardless of what the case may be. Maybe you had a traumatic childhood, or maybe you've had abusive relationships, or maybe you just went through a period of time where you were obese, or maybe there was a period of time where you self sabotage, or a period of time where you failed, where you gave up, where you had thoughts that you don't want to ever think about again. Shadow work is getting to know those versions of yourself, knowing the triggers, knowing when it started, knowing where it all began, and how you can take your power back from those times, those places, those people, those things. Even if it's abusive relationships or substances, regardless of what it is, you won't truly love yourself until you go into the closet of all the chapters that you feel that you can't access, you can't go into because they're not worthy. Or maybe it's because there's a fear. You are afraid that if you go into those dark spaces, you won't come back. You won't see light again. You'll fall deeper into the pits than you were before. That's an illusion. Shadow work gives you the power to totally reclaim yourself completely and authentically. You are deserving of that love. You are deserving of seeing all parts of yourself and accepting it. But really, even to understand why you were that way. Maybe you had an awful season where you were a mean person to other people, but there was a reason why. Shadow work is going to the source of all these shadows that are plaguing you, that parade around those happy days that are in the corner. You know, those feelings when you're at home or you're by yourself and it's late at night and you just feel just icky. You know that something is nudging to be let out, that there's something in your soul that needs to be released, but you're too afraid to. So then you just go to sleep or you mask it doing something else. Maybe you have a glass of wine, maybe you watch some comfort TV show, maybe you doom scroll, you find any sort of way. Maybe you just stay busy, you stay out the house, you don't give yourself time to sit with your thoughts. Whichever way you decide to mask and avoid these feelings, they're always going to be there and they're going to keep coming and you're going to keep having to run away from them. But every time you run away from those feelings, you're telling yourself, your inner child, your inner self, that they are not worthy of being free. I don't care what anyone says. If you are not doing shadow work, you don't love yourself enough. You don't. And you won't be able to love other people the way they deserve to be loved. You won't be able to unconditionally love anything if you're not doing shadow work. Shadow work is essential to reclaiming all of who you are. Shining light on the dark only illuminates it even more and it just brings more joy to your entire world. And one thing that made me feel amazing in my shadow work journey, and I was doing shadow work without even really knowing what the term was. I remember my first dark night of the soul. I remember just going into these chapters of journaling about things and releasing frustrations and starting to learn like my various patterns and why I was this way. I was basically doing shadow work and not understanding what shadow work was, but I was doing the steps. One thing that gave me so much joy and like pride was that I owned up to all my past mistakes, all the mishaps, all the ways that I may have harmed someone else, or I played the victim, or in ways where I felt like I was an awful person. anyway, and like we all can be, and I don't want to say I was an awful person, but I've done things where I regret, and I feel like we all have. And if you've lived a life where you've done nothing that you regret, I want to let you know that you really need to do the shadow work. But one thing that gave me the most pride of going deep into my soul and going into the shadows was that no one could hold anything above me that I had not checked within myself. I knew that all my deepest and darkest parts and seasons and times, all my traumas, that I knew firsthand, that I was able to talk about. I was comfortable with it. No one could come to me and bring up a chapter of my life and make me feel guilty or bad or have any power over me, because I gave myself that love. I told myself I was still worthy of love. I told myself, hey, this was bad. This is why it happened. This is why you were in this cycle. And this is how you will grow past it. Part of loving yourself is trusting yourself, but it's also setting better realities for yourself. True love is, once like I'm saying, is doing the shadow work, but to do the shadow work is to bring yourself to the life that you're deserving. You're deserving to live. If you don't do the shadow work, you're going to repeat these cycles. You're going to let your past, your trauma, your mistakes continue to run you. If you don't look into the shadows will always be there. Just because you're not looking at it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. True self-love is allowing yourself to have a life that is liberating, that is full of joy, where you can find inner peace, where you can get back on track as the person you are meant to be on this earth. So I don't care what anyone has to say. If you're not doing the shadow work, you don't love yourself enough. And you won't be able to love anyone else in your life unconditionally, because you don't know how to love yourself unconditionally.